Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another little review thingy here for you. As always, I'm your sort of host, if you wish. Uh, Purple Midnight 8, of course, or Mitchell, whatever you want to say. Joined yet again, not by Morgan, yet again by Amelia. Why don't you say a little hello?
Hello, Morgan's having a little vacation.
Yeah, Morgan's having a little vacation. He has been in a solid one review, but here we are. So today we are reviewing the 2009 psychological horror thriller movie Triangle.
My favourite film, which I recommended to you, by the way.
Yep, she got picked this week because it was only fair because obviously I've picked all the other ones. I mean, it's not like I've picked generally bad films. I mean, there was Santa's Sleigh, underrated review yet again. But yeah, it was about time you had a little pick of our movie of the. We want to do this weekly, but we've been ill. There's been health. There's just been shit. I've got
Well,
work.
basically, I've been unwell for like a month and a bit, and I've only just now fully getting there recovered, and then you haven't been well. So this is kind of like the first week we've kind of both been well enough to do something.
On and off, there's been problems stopping us from doing reviews. Because our last one was scary. I mean, yeah, scary movie we did just under 2 weeks ago as a recording, 11 days ago. So that'll be the 6th of February.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're back. We're back with another review. Triangle. When we looked it up, was described as a British film. Like, I mean, it was only released in the UK. I found out it had no US like release. But literally, I've got on Wikipedia. It's described as Triangle brackets 2009 British film, and none of the cast are British. Well, not
Mm.
none of the characters are British, and it's sponsored by the National Lottery, I think.
And the UK, what's it, Film Council as well.
Yeah, the UK Film Council.
Which is why I think they called it British then, because as soon as you get the UK Film Council, that's like, oh, Britain, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I was probably exclusive just to Britain, but
Well,
it's
we've got Triangle was a British Australian co-production, which explains why weirdly Liam Hemsworth was in it. I mean, not well, it doesn't explain it, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know why. But interestingly, it says on Wikipedia that the UK Film Council ordered 1.6 million pounds or 2.8 million of public money from the National Lottery Fund towards the development, production, and distribution. So it's what? So the film. I'm just going to read a little bit of production information straight off of Wikipedia. You can look it up yourself. But yeah, I just want to do it. The film was shot on sets and on location in Queensland, Australia. Smith, who is our director, Christopher Smith. I don't know what else he's directed. He's not a big name. He doesn't even have an image on Wikipedia. Literally nothing I've ever heard of.
Oh, um, it turns out that he was the feature film of Creep, which was done in 2004. If that's it, yes, we have Creep. I have Creep on DVD. That was my late mother's. I've seen Creep. It's quite a good one, but it's got a bit of gore in there.
Love a bit of gore. It's not a good horror
Well,
movie.
it's not
About
kind of gore
murderers.
as in like killings. It's more of a violation of a human body.
Yummy.
Put it
Sounds
that way.
delicious. Anyway, yeah, Christopher Smith he directed Creep. It says he's known for Creep, Severance, obviously Triangle, and a film called Black Death. So yeah, no idea really about who he is. No offense to him. So he insisted, interestingly, on having a set constructed that just depicted the exterior of a cruise liner in order to minimize shooting in front of green screens. That's great, but there's still a lot of green screens used,
Mm.
particularly with the ocean and characters against the ocean. But it wasn't too bad. I did like how a lot of it was on sets, though. Having something physical makes a complete difference for a
I'm
film to
really
me.
honest. This is my favourite film. Back in the day when we had blockbusters, is how I found this gem of like a movie. And I've watched it like again and again and again, and I never get bored of it, and I never really find any faults with it. So I know you're going to criticize us, and it kind of hurts a little bit because it's like my favorite film.
You'd be surprised how little of my notes is genuine criticism, such as like other films. You said to me that right after we finished, you said to me, you said, I'm scared of how much you're gonna like destroy this film or something along those lines. But I
Mm.
said to you, I said I actually really enjoyed it, which is a pleasant change from some of the films we've covered
It's
already.
really weird because I remember when it came out, there wasn't a lot of advertisement. There wasn't a lot of like, there wasn't really in the cinema.
And as I say, it was only
It
released in
was
the
like,
UK,
you
so
know, a section of blockbusters like at the back where you'd have your
it's like the
really,
bargain bin where all the stuff no
where
one
you'd
wants
have your
goes.
gems and stuff, because that's where I got like Homecoming, The Life Before Our Eyes. There are other good films, Another Earth as well, which are kind of rare gems that you can't really buy on DVD anymore, just because I didn't get like a lot of, it's not as big
They were
as
lower budget, sort of independent style films.
Avatar. Shit.
Especially Another Earth. From the
Mm,
things I've seen, if you watched it, it was definitely lower budget. You could tell that the technology they have isn't up to date, like your
mm.
blockbuster films.
I miss what, but
Yeah, block.
I miss finding those random gems in films.
Yeah, those were the days. So, that's interesting. To note the movie is based in part of the story of Sisyphus, Greek mythology. We heard about it in the film.
Mhm.
Obviously, the boat is named after another Greek bit of like mythology, which we'll get into a bit later on. But it's the story of Sisyphus is he's a mythological figure who is cursed to repeatedly push a boulder up a hill without ever reaching the top, which goes back into again. I'll say it now. Spoiler warning from here on
I'm
out.
really gonna spoil this
There is
because
going to be a lot of spoilers throughout because we're just going to be discussing it.
I've
Like
seen it
it's a
so many
review.
times.
If you're going to watch any of the reviews on this channel, you will know that there is spoilers throughout.
Mhm.
So even if I make that clear, I will put that in every video. Just saying that we are going to be spoiling the shit out of this film, and also bad language. But
But
anyway,
I also want to give credit to Melissa George because she's been in quite a lot. Um, she's been in like 30 Days of Night. There was a couple of other films she was in.
she was in the Amityville Horror. I
A
think
Lo-
it's a remake.
sorry, A Lonely Place to Die. I also have in my DVD collection that she was in that, and that was absolutely her acting is just really good. And plus, she's a really pretty lady in a person herself.
Just a quick side note: do you know how many Amityville Horror films there? The first one came out in 1979. There are, I think they're in their 20s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. There are 40 films in this one franchise. So me saying she was in the Amityville horror film, yeah, okay, which one? She was in the 2005 remake of the original. We'll say that. That would be
No, but
probably.
she's also in 30 Days a Night, which is another really good film that
Yeah, don't
is.
get me wrong, she's in a lot, but I think that may be the biggest thing she was in. Yeah, there's not a lot I really know from. She was apparently in Friends, but I don't watch that shit. I can't stand them sitcoms that pretend they're in front of
Oh,
a
she's
studio
been in
audience.
a lot.
She's been in a lot. She has been in a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I've never heard of at all.
I mean, if any of you watch Home and Away, she was in it when she was younger. She was in that.
And Grey's Anatomy.
Mm.
But anyway, yep, we'll move on. So, I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, back to the story of Sisyphus. It goes to, again, spoilers, it goes to the film's theme of this being in a time loop. But rather than it being like Groundhog Day, where when he kills himself or he dies, the day restarts, this is just a matter of, well, technically it is like that. Once all her friends die, but not her, the loop then restarts. So as soon as everyone dies, or our main cast dies, which honestly, very small cast. Very small cast for a film that has a couple of million behind it. But that's good because all the budget then went towards like your physical makeup, which was really good,
Yeah, but I think
and the sets.
the smaller the cast, the better that made that film. Yeah, because obviously you literally have like a handful of characters who you're following, and
That's what
obviously
about
Melissa George
one, two,
is,
three, four, five, six. There's about 6 or 7 people, and that's really it.
yeah, Melissa George is the main character we're going to be following throughout this film, but obviously you've got your side characters who kind of help bring the story.
What you'd see in a horror film, they'd basically be your group of usually young, attractive teenagers, but they're not though. They're like middle aged, a couple of them. But it's your like not cannon fodder, but sort of.
I will say, when you go into this film and you watch it the first time, like I did, you're going to be really kind of confused and things aren't going to really click. But then
Definitely, it's worth a
if
rewatch.
you watch it again, you're going to kind of get it. But then as I watched it this time, I noticed little things that kind of stood out to me newer. But kind of thing, you know, what it says on the DVD case is that, you know, it will trip you over and over again because it does that because I still have some questions about this film in order for it to make sense.
There is a lot of questions that we were thinking of during the film because we a little bit like in the middle of the film, her necklace gets caught on a grate, and she looks through the grate and sees there's a big pile of them, where other versions of herself have also dropped their necklace in. But then it adds the extra question of like the axe she leaves. Why aren't there loads of axes? Why isn't there a bunch of shotguns shotguns that really bothered me in this film?
So I was going to say, to just give kind of a kind of summary of the film we're talking about, it's kind of a single mother where the father's not involved, where she has a son who has a, you can see his disability. So I think it's like
I believe on
autism.
Wikipedia it said it was autistic,
Yeah,
and I think
so
even the character says it later on.
because his with Tommy's autism, you can see it. You can see.
Unfortunately, they made him autistic for no reason in the long run. He was it was literally not brought up. It wasn't a plot point. They just made him autistic for whatever reason.
Yeah, but now as I look back on it, I think that if you notice towards the end of the film, well, anyway, it's her trying to constantly get back to her son, and she obviously loves her son very much, but there is points in the film where it does point to her being a bad mother, and she realizes she's a bad mother.
It
So
really speaks with her being a bad mother.
Seems to be like an obsession. Obviously, her son, guilt, not doing enough. You know, obviously being a single parent on your own with a child who's got severe autism when they need a routine and they don't like things a certain way, especially the mention of the floors needing to be shiny and nothing on the window screen and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a boat trip kind of sea film, but obviously for her trying to get back to him. And if that means killing in the process, she's going to do it.
She will do anything to get back to her son. So, with one last thing before we get into this fucking mind-boggling film, you can get it on DVD anywhere. I don't know about, but you can also watch it on Apple TV. So, if you for some reason have that, because we had it and just I don't think we really used it. I think we had it because your stepdad had it, and then that was about it.
Yeah.
So it was just a bit of crap. Anyway, we're now going to go into the main film. Of course, go out and watch it for yourself. There's a lot we're going to mention that you don't want spoiled, other than the fact we did just mention that it's in a time loop. Anyway, I did warn you before that. So there's a lot of other stuff that gives away that is confusing, that if you watch it first, it has such a good payoff that's worth watching it before you listen to the rest of this, because it's for a film that's about a time loop, it executes it pretty well. There's a lot of other things a lot of questions, but we'll discuss that a bit later on. So our movie begins. We have, as mentioned before, we have the mother whose name is Jess. She is portrayed by Melissa George, and her pointlessly autistic son called Tommy, who is portrayed by Joshua McKee. I don't know, McIvor. I've probably pronounced it first go, but now I'm paranoid I haven't. So her son is shown crying, and she's like hugging him, and she's just like, "It's all a bad dream. It's all a bad dream."
Mm.
And it's just obviously what you do with your son, or your child, I should say, if they have a bad dream. Basically, I don't need to tell you how parenting works.
I won't lie, it was very good how they looped it together though, because
Yep.
what they show you at the beginning of the film comes at the end of the film as well, and that's when that will all click and make sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff during this opening sort of, even before the credits and during the credits, when we have our little montage, just showing what I thought was the daily life, but is the same day in the time loop. So, like when the paint spills on the floor, and her and Tommy going out. Well, not going out, but they go. She goes to drop him off at. Drop him off at school.
Mm-hmm. So obviously at the beginning we see her.
At the beginning, you just think, "Oh, this is just a regular day. These people are fine. It's a nice little mother and son relationship." But when it gets to the end and everything comes full circle again, because what we see is the exact. We see the day in its full duration, essentially. So it goes from it goes the morning, and then she wakes up later on, and it's the morning again. It's like Groundhog Day.
It's a continuous nightmare that she's having to play this out over and over again.
Yeah. So she's essentially going to meet with her friends, who we'll describe in a minute, for a boat trip, just out into the wide ocean for whatever reason. They don't really explain. I think they're just like, we should go out, whatever, see where the world takes us. We get to meet a few. Oh, I've just pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I'm doing it on the computer this time because I can't read my own handwriting sometimes.
Not only that, you've injured your hands.
And my hand is fucked, so I can't write. So we meet a couple of our extra cast before we meet our last one. We get to meet Greg, Heather, Sally, and Downey. Greg is played by Michael Dorman, known for playing. I can't remember his fucking name now, even though I've just looked it up. He was in The Invisible Man as I'm gonna have to have a look now. I'm terrible.
As the brother.
Yeah, she played the brother of Adrian, Tom, which was spoilers for that film. Spoilers for just films in general, I guess. Tom was designed to be your fake out killer, but eventually it wasn't. It was actually revealed to be the other brother.
Mm-hmm.
So, Greg, Michael Dorman. We've got Heather, who I wanted to put down. I want to say a main character, does not be a main member of the cast. She's forgotten about pretty quick, to be honest. Heather, Sally, and Downey. Sally is played by Rachel Carpani, and Downey, whose name irritates me because that's apparently his actual name, played by Henry Nixon. I haven't heard of either of these people before. They do point out that her son isn't with her, and they do sort of question that, and she's just like, "Oh, he's at school." But as we learn at the end of the film, that is not the case. And when they go out, we get to meet Victor, who is our last member of the main cast, who is weirdly played by Liam Hemsworth. For whatever reason, Liam Hemsworth is in this film, and he's probably the biggest star in this fairly low budget film. And he has this weird, he has a buzz cut, which is really strange, considering how he is now. If you somehow don't know who Liam Hemsworth is, he's the brother of Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor, and is going to be the replacement for Henry Cavill in The Witcher.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Did you not?
No.
Oh, there you go. Now you do.
I was kind of boycotting it because they kind of took Henry Cavill out of The Witcher. Like,
But I took him out so he could play Superman again, and then yeah, that didn't work out so much anymore. So Jess, who is tired, has a little nappy nap on the boat. She has a vision of her waking up on a beach, and what is assumed to be a corpse is seen floating in the sea and the waves behind her.
now, may I say that the flashback that she had was very cleverly put in there because
The flashback is there is just to
when
be
you get
like, oh,
to
it's a
the
nightmare.
end, you realise that because obviously there's a copy of her, there's another copy of her, there's another copy of her, and the timelines are all playing out. So when you go back on that film and you see that flash, you realise that that timeline is happening for her in that timeline, if that makes sense.
That's not how she's explaining it. That is just how the film is. It's a confusing film
Yeah, it's a
that we
bit
will do our
tricky.
best. Victor, of course, played by Liam Hemsworth, who is an Australian, is an American in this film. For the most part, his accent's okay, but there was a lot where it slipped through. I mean, it's to be expected because an American accent while an Australian, I can imagine, can be a difficult accent to do.
Sorry, where did you get the corpse from? Seen floating in the scene of her having a vision.
You know when she's on the beach, she looks at the waves and there's like that blob floating.
That's her jumper.
Yeah, but it looks like a dead body. That's her boiler suit. That's that suit she has on later on when she has the sack on.
Mm.
But that looked like a body to me. But it isn't. Anyway, the spoiler is. Oh, I just put a C in it. Oh god, I'm pressing more buttons. Anyway, yeah, that's her boiler suit, but it looked like a corpse. Yeah, Tommy's mentioned to be at special needs school while they're on their trip. Completely wrong. We'll get into that later on.
Yeah,
Heather and
Tommy ain't at school, and he ain't at home either.
he ain't fucking anywhere. This kid. So Heather and Sally are gossiping about Jess's son behind her back. Sally, who I will just quickly add, looks like Daphne from the Scooby-Doo films. The outfit she's wearing in that scene, I was just straight away like, she looks like fucking Daphne. Sally straight up calls her son retarded, which at that point is when it was just about coming to the point where it's like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's not okay to make fun of people with disabilities.
Mm.
And I did also write that it seemed like the audio wasn't actually dubbed over while they were on a boat. It seemed like rather than them going into a booth afterwards and re-recording the voice lines, they actually did it there, which is impressive considering they're on the open ocean. Oh, hang on, I've made my mic make. Also, Silver is here again. He never leaves. The wind. This is never really explained, but I assume it's the timeline, the time loop coming into effect. The wind literally disappears and they're left sort of stranded in the ocean.
Yeah, it's just literally the wind is just like dropped, gone.
The wind completely stops. There's no gentle breeze because obviously it's a yacht. It's pushed on by the wind, but they say they have an engine as well, which was pointless in that because of what happens to that boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, the wind literally disappears. I mean, at least they even had the water stop. You didn't see any ripples or anything. The water was as still as anything. And then a storm cloud is randomly spotted out of nowhere, and it looks like CGI that would come from Sharknado.
God,
Yeah, that's a film. It's one of those weird late 2000s CG where it just looks a bit.
It's not bad compared.
It's not the worst.
Sharknado.
Sharknado, I fucking really want to cover for the channel. But my god, it is about 7 films long, and it is a chore to sit through. As you found out, it gets worse with the sequels.
Yeah, I've seen the first one, and it was just horrific.
Yeah. So Greg, very confused, attempts to contact the Coast Guard. Don't know, basically being like, "What's happened with the wind?" And the Coast Guard does respond, and he just go, "I don't fucking know, mate. Lol." And then they pick up a distress signal coming from an unknown woman. Now, again, spoilers. You initially thought that it was Heather.
No, I thought that was Jess, but then when I watched it, I remember it was Sally because Sally was then trying to call and she said, "Help me, help me."
Yeah, it's later revealed that it's Sally
So
that has sent the
literally,
distress call.
Greg and Jess actually hearing Sally's voice through the
They were hearing another timeline ahead of the current timeline we're in for the film. So the storm then hits the boat really hard and causes some serious damage and flooding, which it's realistic. I mean, come on, but it does flood very quickly. The boat then eventually capsizes. It pans out to the big CGI ocean in the storm. Who else? So, three of them are topside. Greg, Jess, and
uh
I think no, Victor fell through the sea.
Do it, Danny.
Downey.
Yeah, because Victor was with Sally and
Yeah, because
Heather.
they fell through. He fell through, and those two were down. Yeah, so it pans out, and there's three of them are on the boat, but when it pans out, there's only two of them, which was really strange. I just found that a bit weird that they would put enough effort into put two characters on there, but then not the third one for continuity. It's a little thing on critiquing nothing really.
Yeah,
It's
because you
fine.
kind of see Heather get sucked out, because they literally do a shot where she's literally sucked out of that boat, and then she's missing, gone.
Yeah, like the next morning, like no, the storm suddenly passes and they all slowly emerge, and we see that Heather is left missing, and it can be assumed that Heather is drowned, which is understandable because obviously it's a fucking storm and she's in the middle of the ocean. There's no.
Just any storm. It was
It was an electrical
storm
storm.
that just rocked up out of nowhere, and as soon as Heather was gone, that then went.
It was definitely like it's definitely another thing that's contributing towards the time loop. How it's just there to start the chain of events forward, and then disappears.
Does this remind you of Final Destination?
No, not at all.
It does a little bit.
It does a little bit of how something happens that causes the events of the. Well, that's just how film is. It more reminds me a lot of a game called Man of Medan, which me and Morgan played but didn't do it for the channel. It's also a game where it's set on an old ship and there's that sort of like what's real and what isn't. It's not a time loop. I think a lot of people, depending if, well, I would say a lot of people, but it's this is a review of a film, not a game, of course. I want to see if I can find it. Because I'm on the Xbox. Well, I'm not on the Xbox as the same. If I can find it. It's basically hallucinations where they think they're being attacked by someone, but they're just seeing each other in different forms. It's on a big abandoned like military ship. It's just very similar to this. So anyway, storm passes. The group is now left stranded on the upside down boat, and then all of a sudden, it just appears out of thin air, really. Because there's not a mist or whatever. It just sort of dissipates in front of them, which is going to be our main setting of the ship. Our main setting of the film. Interestingly, for a film of this sort of scale, they did well to make the ship look aged. It's there to make you think, that's not a new ship that we can trust. That's not like a brand new cruise liner or whatever. Because it's shown to be aged, like it's rusted, it's got like green moss on it. It's just been out on the sea for longer than it should without being repaired or anything. It's just shown to be a ship. It's basically a ghost ship, but there ain't any ghost on it. Regrettably, there's not much that's really told about the ship. We do know the name and a bit more of that a bit later on, but there's nothing that suggests how it got there, what happened to the crew on it, anything like that. It just sort of appears, and that's it.
We have a tiny little section where there's like a little bit of information, a history about the boat. That
But they basically they literally say the story of Sisyphus, which of course later is to clue in on the theme of it being a time loop and stuff like that. But there's nothing that describes explicitly the origins of the ship, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a bit of mystery, but there's nothing that explains the story that there could have been. There could have been some storytelling rather than it just being like this random thing they find in the middle of the ocean for no reason.
It's kind of convenient how it rocks up at the right time as well.
Yeah.
Well, not the right time for them, but you know.
Yeah, it would have been nice to just have a bit more storytelling about the ship. Because going back to Man of Medan, which unfortunately I am going to be comparing this to, that ship, it's revealed that all the crew on there suffered from the same hallucinatory effects and killed each other. They were either driven mad until they killed themselves, or they killed each other. Fine. We don't know much about that. There's a lot of physical storytelling and stuff you learn. But here it's like there's no skeletons, there's no notes left behind. I know it's not a game, but there's nothing that hints.
Actually, you say there's no note, but there was, because it didn't make sense how there wasn't a lot of bodies at the beginning of the film. But then as we move on, you know, we then come to a section where there's multiples of Sallys just lying there. Dead,
Yeah, but I mean the
spoilers.
bodies of like the crew.
But there was like notes and what was it? Her necklace.
Yeah, but I know about them, about notes, but there's nothing that explains the ship itself. There's nothing that mentions any crew or anything like that. So I'm criticising a lot about a fucking boat. Like, it would have just been nice to have a bit of explanation of the origin of the ship.
Yeah, but
Unless maybe
they did say 32.
that may have been when it was made. But that ship did have it had a working radio enough to send out a distress signal, which for a ship from the 1932, I don't know. Maybe they were possibly hoping to do a prequel or something like that, and unfortunately didn't come around. But doesn't matter. I would have just liked to see a bit more explanation about the origins and stuff like that. So they board it and are relieved to have seen being seemingly rescued, but as we just discussed, there's no one on it. Well, no one on it, in quotation marks, of course, except for the rest of the copies of Sally that are Jess that are still going around. Jess is not pleased. This is where she first starts realising something isn't right, other than the fact it's a big empty ship, but more like she feels familiar with it. Looking up.
I'm literally trying to find more information on the ship.
Okay. Anyway, lost where I was. So they go through the corridors of like the cabins. Jess is still feeling very uneasy, and that's when they find like these information plaques, which explain, like, it gives a bit of information about the boat, but as I say, not enough that I felt satisfied by it. As I say, it's a tiny little issue that I can understand for a lower budget film like this, but it's just me nitpicking really. But we find out that the boat is called the Aeolus, I think is how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Who in Greek mythology is the son of Poseidon and also the god of winds. Of course, Poseidon is the god of the ocean, so that links back to, this.
So it says here the ship actually launched during the 30s, and there is a photo of it dating to 1932.
Let me have a little read. Oh. The crew and it's deserted, apparently long gone. The ship contains manifestations of the real world, such as the room number from Jess's house, and the logo from the marching band's drum is found in the ballroom. Certain objects remain throughout the loop, others disappear and reappear. Notable skips in time happen, most notably a buffet that appears fresh and edible appears completely rotten in another scene. Ship has a lot of long corridors, despite showing obvious evidence of aging and despite being abandoned. The ALS is mechanically sound and has electrical power and fully functional engines. No signs of damage, distress, or any fight, mutiny, or violence on board, and a reason for it being abandoned is left empty. So yeah, basically, it's just weird. It's interesting to know about it, but I mean, like,
Mm.
It would have been nice to have some explanation. But I guess it's left to be like, is this real? Is this like... As there's a character later on, right at the end, near towards the end, that is who I will talk about that sounds like a persona, like a manifestation of death due to how he acts and how he speaks and how he's dressed. Almost as if he's part of it, but... So, they wander the empty halls to find literally no one, and Jess feels like she knows the place. So they hear like a clanging, like some keys have been dropped on the floor, which of course is what happened. But Victor then finds a keyring and just says they're hers. And she proves it by opening a little locket that then has a picture of her and Tommy. And they're like, oh, what the hell? But they think that is enough for them to think that Heather is alive. The key, like, gave them the keys, but weirdly left without saying anything. And even Downey brings that up. Downey's like, "What? So she just give us the keys and leave?" And then Sally was like, "Yeah, maybe." It's like, would she really? Would she really just leave the keys and go? I don't know.
No, she's...
So they end up in the ballroom eventually, which is sort of it's a big part of the film because a lot of stuff happens here. There's the buffet that's immaculate, as mentioned before, and quickly they're just like, "Oh, what time is it for you?" And then Greg checks his watch and it's 11:30, but for Jess's it matches the ship's time of 8:15, which is weird, really, because why is her watch synced to that? That wouldn't even make sense in the time loop.
Mm.
I don't know. But they grew up with Greg going with Jess, Sally with Downey, and Victor is left to walk on his own, basically. Jess and Greg find a cabin where a tap is running, and a mirror has a message in blood reading "Go to the theatre," which, once again, is written by Jess in this timeline, but later on. I will just add, it's room 237. Room 237 is it's a very popular number for movies to have. Like, it's from The Shining, basically. That's the room where all the messed up shit happened. That's where all the main, like, violent stuff happened. So 237 is basically like an urban legend sort of. It's used a lot throughout films. There's like a little like, aha, remember The Shining? But yeah, that's just a fun little like, oh, look at that sort of thing. So, Sally and Downey then find a trail of blood that leads them to the theatre, which once again will come back in. Jess then goes back to the ballroom. Greg heads to the theatre, but off script. No, they had that argument, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
He basically said, "Oh, is this all in your head?" And it's like, is it?
Yeah, he basically doesn't believe her and thinks that she's...
Yeah. So Jess returns to the ballroom on her own and finds the buffet is rotten. This isn't really explained. I think it's just a lot about this messing with her. So
But it could be because, like, because obviously throughout the film we kind of realise that, you've got, Jess number one starting at the beginning of the loop, and then Jess 2 and then Jess 3 that are both on the boat. They're going to be in, like, different kind of loops.
Yeah, but I don't understand why the food would be rotten is the only thing.
Because if it goes on to, if, like, Jess 1 or Jess 2 is around, it kind of makes sense in my head, but I'm finding it really hard to explain it. But all I can think of is that as the timeline is progressing and starting again, because you've got throughout the film you see, Jess in different sections, or multiple Jesses in different sections. I kind of think it's got something to do with this time loop. It
has to in some way. As simple as that, really. But Jess returns to the ballroom. Yeah, Victor makes his way back into the film, covered in blood, and attacks her, which is very confusing. But later on, it's explained a bit more. She pokes a disgusting hole that's in the back of his head. Like, it is like his brain is partially like sticking out. That sort of like stuns him because obviously that would happen if someone pokes a hole in your head that links to your brain. And that causes him to sort of go weak, and she throws him off, and he cracks his head on the table, and that kills him. This is our first time loop death. Whether or not this is the technically, I want to say canon death, but if this is like your main, like official death, if you want to say, like the one that's always going to happen regardless of actions.
Well, mind you, wouldn't you count Heather as the first death? Because
Heather is the first death technically, but when it comes to in the time, well, oh no, I guess Heather does count in the. They do constantly
the time
get.
loop kind of starts from when she gets.
Yeah, it's right at the beginning. It's never really said when it starts, but yeah. Which also doesn't explain how she's like, I feel like I've been here before, but she would be like, she wouldn't say that if she's been there already.
But then there's a part of her that wants to go home to Tommy's, trying to change that loop.
She wants to change it in order to escape from it. But, excuse me, yeah, she pokes a hole in the back of his head and he cracking his head against the table, and that kills him. Because obviously he's already got brain damage, he probably hit it even more and that killed him. Because he doesn't speak, so I assume that was enough for his brain to partially shut down. Which is fair, he did get his head impaled on a spike, we see later on. A gunshot is then heard, and she rushes into the theatre. And Greg said to Downey and Sally, who was also there at the time, that Jess shot him, and he is shown just to be dead. He has succumbed to his gunshot wound off screen, but he does succumb to it on screen later on, kind of, when we then see how it happened. It's very much like, oh, okay. So then, a gunman who will be referred to this version, as I say, I'm gonna give up saying spoilers. The gunman appears out of nowhere, and this is a version of Jess. The cat is giving me the evils. Sorry, and he's off to sleep again. The gunman who was wearing the boiler suit mentioned earlier and the mask.
Which is going to be.
It's a version of Jess,
but the one who's been there longer on that boat, if that makes sense.
The Jess in the boiler suit and the mask is the one near the end of the loop. So.
And the one down the bottom with Sally.
Whoever's with Sally and Downey is essentially
is
the newest to the boat. The one who hasn't really tried to change anything as far as we can tell. So it really irritates me. He does indeed shoot and kill Downey and Sally as their first timeline deaths. It really bothers me because it's an over-under shotgun that she manages to fire like a rifle. You know how weird question. You know how shotgun works, don't you? You know, rather than firing a bullet, it sends out pellets. So rather than it shooting one straight, it shoots out like a spray of them. How the fuck does he hit them so well? She hit them so well. Because it's a shotgun that she basically fires and it hits them dead on no matter what.
Like, I noticed in the film, like, at the beginning the shooting was really good, but then as we go more further into the story, her aim is like shit.
Well, to be fair, no offense to her, Melissa George isn't the biggest in regards to height, but also like athletically big, and a shotgun is fucking heavy, and the fucking recoil on that would be enough to make her go. It makes sense of why her accuracy isn't great when she's continuously trying to shoot at them, but then yeah. And obviously she wouldn't have, well, she's an American, she probably has used a gun, America. But it makes sense that but also she's panicking. There's a lot that would explain why she's not doing great, because she doesn't want to kill these people, but she feels like she has to, because that's why she hesitates to shoot herself. Not herself, that version of her, the copy or the original.
Because she says a lot in the film, you're not me.
Yeah, it does make her sound fucking mental until the in the time loop. So they then have a fight. They chase around the ship a bit. The gunman then hits her on the back of her head, and she's crawling away. The gunman's like hesitating, and then ultimately they fight. The gunman fires both rounds at RGS, misses them both, and then throws the shotgun like she frisbees it. Like it hits her, but then the gun is just abandoned. I mean, I understand that the gunman Jess wouldn't be able to just flick the barrel open, and slam him in quick enough not to be attacked. But flinging the gun at her, keep the gun, reload it, and then fucking power the bitch. Anyway, so they have a fight. Jess ultimately overpowers her. Overpowers gunman Jess. The masked person. Gunman Jess then says something that you can't really hear, but then basically says you have to kill them all, which is basically how she would not escape the time loop, but in order to reset it. So then Jess hits her with. She doesn't axe her with a fire axe. She sort of like pushes her, because how would she survive to wake up on the beach later? So hits her with the axe, but not enough to hurt her. And that, I was going to call it a kill when we were first writing it, but obviously with the reveal that is Jess living out the time loop, it's not a kill. So, moving on.
As I say, it's interesting how this was all put together.
Yeah. So Jess then heads indoors into like a cabin, and there's a music player.
A really old-fashioned.
A really old like vinyl player, like a record player, I should say. And she sort of bumps it, and then the music stutters, but also the film itself stutters. Which at that point, before we find out, well, we don't find out. You come to the conclusion that we made earlier, that it's the storm that sort of caused the time loop. That was enough for me to think, oh, is that what causes the time loop to restart? Because that happens, and then she hears shouting coming from outside, and she sees her and her friends on the yacht like they were earlier. So I thought, is that what causes the time loop to reset? But it isn't. It's when everyone dies. It's confusing.
Yeah, so literally everyone apart from her has to die in order for the time loop to reset.
Yeah.
And obviously she tries a new time. You know, do different things in order to change the loop, to try and, you know, because I don't know, like a lot of people say, like if you once, like,
Yeah.
so
As we find out, her trying to change it causes the events. Because obviously she walks in and interrupts the version of her that comes after her. She goes in just as before Victor attacks her, and that's enough to cause her to become the gunman later. It's just strange. So she then follows the group around, hiding, just watching the same events as earlier, and just reveals that she dropped the keys, because she sort of slumps down the wall and it falls out of her pocket. And she does a runner.
Yeah, well, she's in the middle of.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a bit too much? You've been doing it again and again, running around on a boat and like having to say, because Greg is like a love interest, and having to say goodbye to her over again. Or
yeah. When it is her who kills him, like, it's clear she really doesn't want to shoot him, but she's like, I am sorry. Like, she does mean it. So she runs outside not onto the deck, but onto the side of the boat. And she looks in the water and sees a body that heavily resembles Downey's, and she says it is Downey's. So then Victor finds her, and she tries to show him the body, but it isn't there or something. It disappears.
The body disappears really quickly, innit? Because I said to you, like...
Because she scares the seagulls that are pecking at her, and then there's no...
And then she throws an apple.
Yeah. So Victor finds her, and she tries to explain it, and he doesn't understand. So while she's sort of like grabbing his shoulders and trying to tell him what's going on, she pushes him. Excuse me. She pushes him into the spike that causes the hole in the back of his head. And that also backs up the idea that I put forward of him getting brain damage from that. He can't speak because he is like stunned, but he's like muttering to himself. So that sets up how that happened. Of she's trying to change the events, but as a result, she has just caused what happens. So she then just leaves him. She then finds like the crew quarters where she finds notes on the floor that say you need to kill them all.
If they board, kill them.
If they board, kill them all.
Over and over.
Yeah. So she then writes on a notepad next to it that says to see if it is her handwriting, which is presumably how the other notes came about.
Yeah.
Because the other copies of herself have also written it on there. So she does that. She finds where is it? I think I've scrolled down by mistake. She finds the boiler suit that Gunn was wearing, and also the conveniently unlocked armory, which for a time loop is still well stocked, full of shotguns. I don't know if because it leaves the question of does certain things get reset and some don't, because the shotguns are all there,
and the bullets,
and the bullets,
and the suit,
and the suits, but
the fruit,
which because they're taken and gone. But then all the necklaces are still there, which weren't there originally. But the shotguns and the bullets and all that would have been.
Mm.
And spoiler, fuck it. I'm not saying spoilers. It's just fuck it. I really can't be bothered. I don't know. I don't know why I keep saying it. Just habit. But the bodies of Sally later on are all still.
Mm.
But if the guns have been removed, shouldn't they all be piled up somewhere? Because if the timeline is getting reset, surely there shouldn't be any necklaces, and there shouldn't be of any extra Sally's corpses.
In the film, like, shouldn't because she goes from
because she leaves the axe down,
to the axe. So I was like, surely there should be like a ton of axes there standing up.
The rules of the film aren't defined, but they also don't make a lot of sense because the necklace is dropping and staying there. That suggests that the items will stay wherever they got left. But then the fact that there's still a well-stocked armory and the buffet hasn't been touched, it doesn't help clear up that information about does stuff stay the same or does it get changed? Or maybe the ship... I may have just thought something. Maybe the ship itself and everything on it... Yeah, but then Sally's body don't make sense. I was going to say that the guns and that belong to the ship, and therefore they stay. But then the necklaces and the Sally's corpses would also not be there if what was on the ship originally. As I say, the rules aren't defined, but they also aren't consistent.
But it could be because it's her hell, and she's basically living in hell. She's saying that's probably why they're all there. Because it's just happening over and over.
Excuse me for the video game references. But the Black Ops 2 Zombies Mob of the Dead map, which sounds like a stretch, is also a time loop. What happened was the mobsters got killed, they got put literally into hell, and it's all about them being stuck there for their sins in their life. And the whole point of the Easter egg, the story of it, is to either keep the timeline going or to break it so that they can be free. So every time they completely die, they then restart how it began. So it's very similar to that of how they're stuck in hell and they're suffering for it. We'll explain why it's like her own personal hell when we get to the point in the plot why we thought that. So she finds a boiler suit and then she finds the necklaces we were talking about. She looks down at them and that causes her necklace to get stuck on the grate, and that's why they all broke off, because that's other copies doing the exact same thing. Because they look down and their necklaces also got caught and broke off. So she ultimately, she takes a shotgun and some bullets, goes around the ship finding Victor, who is still wounded from his fucking brain damage, who's still walking around. Somehow that man is still walking around, but that's because he's a Hemsworth. But there's so much. I should have left a space in between each paragraph because now I keep looking and being like, where am I? She's ultimately forced to like hide when the copy that comes before her then arrives in order for her to be attacked by Victor, which causes him to die. So she watches Victor go to attack her, like he thought, like originally, but she intervenes, causing her to confront. We'll call her Jess 2. Jess 2, and she points a gun at her, and she's threatening her, and then she doesn't shoot her, and doesn't kill Victor as well. So that leaves the idea that the timeline has then been altered, but because obviously later on we find out that Jess is destined to become the gunman with the boiler suit. So it's sort of like her intervening was part of that time loop to happen. So the original copy still does end up wearing the boiler suit. You just headbutting my mom. The original, our Jess, I think, is what I put. Oh no, the Jess that's now before her, that's in the boiler suit, the gunman. Once again, still shoots and kills Greg, but Jess manages to intervene in time to rescue Sally and Downey from dying, and our Jess therefore somehow managed to shoot that bitch in the head, and she still survives despite her being human as well.
Mm.
So she rescues those two, gives them the gun, and says, "Don't trust anyone. Like, don't trust literally anyone." So she then goes back for Victor, finds him missing from where she left him, and follows the trail of blood to a railing where it's assumed that Victor had been disposed of. So then the I want to call it Gunman Jess. There you go, because Gunman Jess, who was shot in the face, then finds Downey and Sally, pretends to be our Jess. She takes them back to room 237. She then slashes Downey's throat, causing him to die. That kills him, which I believe is the distinct death for him in the timeline. Well, because he had to have his throat slit in order for the message on the mirror to be written.
Well, yeah, but he had 2 deaths, didn't he? Because he died.
He got shot, but he also had his throat slit as well. But I think that is his definitive death, because that needs to be there for the mirror.
Yeah.
So that is basically his death. She also manages to stab Sally, but she runs. Somehow she escapes.
She manages to open the door and literally like hobble.
She's got stabbed in the gut. This is a gut wound that will and does eventually kill her. So she flees and is followed by our Jess, who she doesn't trust because obviously they're same. And that's when we get the reveal that Sally was the one who made the distress call out. She manages to somehow track down the radio in this big fucking ship. Which could go back to the fact that this ship is designed to torment them. Because it's like, oh look, this is you need this for the time loop, so the ship has altered itself in order to become it's altered itself in order for the time loop to still happen. So it's like it's pushed them along a path in order to reach the radio in order for the time loop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what.
Yeah. So Jess continues to try and find Sally, but Sally ends up a few flights up outside. She ends up back outside the ship. Excuse me, and finds a big pile of other Sallys who have been killed by their versions of Gunman Jess who have stabbed them. And there is a lot. There is a big pile of dead bodies.
Yeah, and also very cold dinner.
Yeah, there's a lot of seagulls that are pecking. Seagulls are a big part of this film. I don't know why. They are. I mean, I know it's the ocean, but still, I don't know. So Jess then quickly looks over and sees another version of herself doing the fight with the gunman, where she ends up knocking him over. But it's a different gunman because there's multiple of them. It's very convoluted. So she then turns around and attempts to try and talk to Sally, but Sally is shown to have succumbed from her stab wound. And then once Sally dies, that then means everyone is dead, because Victor has died, Sally has died, and Downey has died. So she then... And Greg, sorry, I forget about Greg. So that is enough for the time loop to then reset, so she once again sees her group on the yacht that's been capsized.
So in total, in that scene, you're seeing like 1, 2, 3 time loops going.
4 technically, because
Mm.
you've got the Jess that gets knocked off the boat. You've got the Jess who knocks her off the boat. You've got our current Jess, and then eventually you have the Jess who's now rocking up to the ship again.
Hmm.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of timelines.
It's a lot of timelines going on at once. So she then tries to head to the engine room and the ship to try and stop the ship, but she does not stop the ship, which once again goes to my theory of the boat being part of not being able to stop the time loop. It's because the time loop has to happen, so the universe is going against it. So she then also goes outside, and she then sees her talking to Victor again when she fatally wounded him with the spike. And then once that version of Jess then leaves, she heads to that Victor and says she knows how to save him before returning to room 237 and finding the bloody corpse of Downey, who by that point has had his throat slit. By Jess 2, who at that point would have been. Basically, she finds a corpse of Downey who had had his throat slit by this time.
She does the cleaning as well, doesn't she? She cleans up all the bodies.
I don't know. It's never really explained. Because you never see that Jess dump any bodies anywhere.
Yeah, but you saw her push what was it, Victor off the boat.
That's the only one she really does. No, she dumps Downey's corpse, and that's it. That's the one she sees floating, I think.
Mm.
No, that's fine. I did write it down here. We were getting there. She then uses Downey's blood to write on the mirror before then proceeding to dump his body overboard so that the time loop can keep going. She then returns to the ballroom where fucking hell. Downey. This is the version of Downey and Sally that have just boarded the boat after Sally had died earlier in the pile of dead bodies. So, also, once again, I think that version of Sally, that is her definitive death, like how Downey had his throat slit because there's all the bodies there. So yeah, they tell her to meet her in the theatre. Just have a side note there, which is where I came to the conclusion that convoluted shit. So she then goes back to the crew quarters, and puts on the gunman outfit. So at this point, we're now at the end stages of the timeline, where she's come full circle to how it was earlier. So this is where it's revealed that she is the original gunman. So then she goes up to Greg, and this is where she knows what she has to do, and she starts apologizing to Greg for what she has to do. Shoots him. So I will spoil it a little bit. I will spoil the review a little bit. He was probably going to be one of my original favorite deaths, just because he gets shot off screen and is dead by the time we see him. But he gets shot point blank in the chest and falls and breaks his leg as well. Like, there is a stunt fall there that looks gnarly. So then she kills Greg, she kills Sally and Downey, and then basically all the events that she originally saw plays out the same way, of her seeing everything again. I'll scroll up and down again. Like, it literally is how, when she was fighting the gunman that we saw, it's now playing out. Like, her being hunted by him, her knocking, the gunman hitting her and pointing the gun at her, and the fight, and the gun being frisbeed at her. So then our version of Jess, who has now come full circle in the time loop, like the sack on, the boiler suit on, she's then knocked off the boat, and as I say before, I would have said that was a kill. But then it's revealed that the vision she had on the yacht is the reality of her then washing up on the beach with the corpse, in quotation marks, being a boiler suit. Anything you want to say? I feel like I've just spoke for about 20 minutes straight.
And then after that, she heads off the beach, gets a hitchhike, and then go back to her house where she finally is reunited but gets to see Tommy. only her Mina, like the Mina mother, is there.
The pre-time loop version of herself is an abusive, very abusive woman who actually hits and yells at her son.
Or because her son, left a toy boat in the pool, and because, like, obviously the Jess who followed knocks on the window, so Tommy gets scared and knocks the paint on the floor. And obviously that pisses off this horrible Jess because, she's now got paint on her, blue paint on her dress, which I think she's trying to. I honestly think she was trying to look good for Greg.
Probably.
But yeah, so we see that, and then Jess kind of knocks on the door.
She rings the doorbell.
Goes round the back, gets like an axe.
She gets a sledgehammer.
Storms in the house.
Walks in the house and bludgeons that version of Jess to death with the sledgehammer.
And then literally gets like a duffel bag out of the cupboard, stuff her body in there with clothes, and then manages to drag her out and pop her in the boot of the car.
Well, we have the moment walked in after she had bludgeoned her to death. So that then brings the movie full circle of the time loop, being that she then, well, it's nearly there, I should say. But that's why Tommy was crying originally, because he saw his mother beat his other mother to death.
Yeah, so Jess obviously drives with Tommy, and they basically leave the house. They end up stopping because they hit
a seagull. Once again, seagulls, big part of this film.
And obviously Tommy, with his autism, like that, so she says that she's going to go and bury it. And
yeah, she stops the car, she parks it, she gets out, picks up the seagull, flings it onto a beach that is full also of dead seagulls that other versions of herself had killed.
She realised she's
and
not
disposed of.
So she's hurrying off. Literally gets in the car, storms off, and obviously there's blood on the windshield, which again Tommy doesn't like, and he's freaking out, being like, "But," because you can hear him say the word blood. And then obviously she puts the window wipers on. She puts the wiper on.
She's trying to like calm him down, but that steers her into the oncoming lane, which she then collides with a big semi truck, which causes the car, in a practical stunt, I believe, to flip, and that is enough that unfortunately does kill Tommy, which reveals how, as I was hinting at earlier, and how he was never at school. He died, and I think the trauma from that caused her to try and just be like, he's at school, in order to sort of put her mind at ease. But that links back, this next character I'm about to talk about is essentially the personification of death, which goes back to the theory we have of it being our own personal hell, and like her for killing him. So the crash also reveals the corpse of old Jess.
Yeah, the one she mounted.
The one she bludgeoned with a sledgehammer. So
how she just randomly managed to fly out of the boot and then fly
completely out the bag. There's just like the bag ripped. So a man then approaches her still at our Jess, who we've had the whole time. He's got like black shirt, black trousers. He's wearing black. She says, "Who are you?" He doesn't say his name. He is literally just credited as driver. But he immediately is like, "Is there somewhere you want to go?" And she's like, "Yeah, take me to the harbour." Which is obviously how not the film starts, but how the incident begins. That's what I think he is, the human form of death, because of how he just happens to, or the ferryman of the underworld. There's a lot of mythology and stuff like that. Because he just shows up and is like, he knows that she needs to restart the time loop. He doesn't say his name. He's wearing all black. But also, when they arrive, he says, "I'll leave the meter running because she'll be back." And she says she promises she'll be back. And so, it's never really said if he is deaf, but that's my theory. But then she meets Victor like originally, and they head to the boat to live it through live through this fucking nightmare again. And that's it. That's how our film ends. That's how the film ends. Um, it was definitely a film I very much enjoyed. I know you. I know this was a film you really liked, and I know you hate when I take the piss out of your films. But no, what were your thoughts on how I bullied this film? Did I bully it too much, or were you surprised with how little I ridiculed it?
No, you did good. I'm really kind of glad that you liked it because obviously, as I say, it's one of my favourites, and I've had it for a long time, and I've loads. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so
So my thoughts, definitely the performance acted. I think the cast did a really good job. I think their cinematography was really good. I think, of course, Melissa George was easily the standout performer, doing well for someone who is the only one who is aware of what's going on and struggling to make people believe her. I think the cinematography was really good. I think there were a lot of really good shots that whoever filmed it did a really good job. I know, obviously, directed by Christopher Smith, but I don't know cinematographer. All around, I really enjoyed it because it's probably, other than Black Adam, I think this is the first film I've actually liked that we've reviewed. But yeah, going to the usual awards for our little reviews of films where people die, at least. My favourite death is probably Victor, his like definitive death of course, the spike through the back of the head, the gnarly like busted skull, brain damage like effects. I love my gore. I love my practical gore. Brilliant. Worst death has to be Heather. Pretty simple.
I thought that'd be Heather, to be fair.
The worst. She is the worst for me because she's only implied to die and it happens off screen. And there's that point where it's like, is Heather alive? She's on screen for about 10 minutes and then she disappears. It's never really confirmed if she dies or not, but because it's never really said if she's involved in the time loop, but I assume she is because, of course, she's there for the boat. If you're going to be picky and say that, like that doesn't count because obviously she died off screen, whatever. Sally, then we'll go with Sally. She got stabbed and bled out. Cool. At least fucking Downey having his throat slit just splash blood everywhere. And obviously Greg getting shot and his leg breaking. Excellent. So yeah, there you go. That's our full little discussion and review of Triangle. So one more thing before we wrap up. What would we rate it out of 10?
10.
You'd rate it 10?
Yeah, straight up.
Is
there.
this our first 10 out of 10 movie of the channel?
Well, it's 10 because it's my favourite.
Is it your favourite, like, all-time film?
Well, it's probably not my all-time film, so I really like it. I would give it a 10.
Yeah. I would personally give it 7.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I pointed out, there's a lot of things that are left unanswered and a lot not set in stone.
Yeah, I did try when it first came out. I did try to like Google more into it, but I didn't.
Well, I think the only issue is it's a single film. There's no novels. There's no prequels or anything anywhere. There is no explains it, unfortunately, because sometimes if it's based off a book, they can. Unfortunately, books can put more. They can describe more.
I think they're leaving it up to the fan theories.
Yeah. But my theory is well, our theory is that she's basically being punished for being an abusive bitch who murdered someone. Yep, so as I say, those are our thoughts on Triangle. Overall, very good film. As I say, there are some issues in it that we pointed out and discussed. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it, which has definitely surprised you.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially for me, because I can't stand a lot of films. So yeah, thank you for listening to us. This is probably the episode where I've sworn the least, which give me credit. Probably because it's a film I actually liked, and that's not me calling everyone under the sun a fucker or a cunt.
I don't. I did say I wasn't. Say I didn't really want you to.
I didn't butcher it, and that's genuinely because I enjoyed it. Not. This is your favourite film. I better be careful with us. So yeah, thank you for listening. We'll be back with something soon. Morgan will come back one day, I promise. Lol.
He'll come back in 10.
Yeah, he'll be back when I don't know. Mobile 3 starts, so about a week from now. So yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one, whenever that may be. Hopefully next, we'll find something else. I don't know what we'll watch next, but
That'll be your turn.
yeah, I don't know what it'll be yet. It'll probably maybe Green Book or maybe oh fucking hell, that Nick Cage film I've got that I can't remember the name of. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, something like that. But yeah, we'll be back soon with something else for you. Ta-ta.